Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, we'd like to invite you to your seat as we're going to start today's session. Before we start, we would like to announce that photography, audio, and video recording will be conducted throughout this event. By participation, attendees acknowledge that their image, voice, and related personal data may be processed by the International Institute for Trade and Development, or ITD, the Ministry of Commerce, for official documentation and public communication purposes, in accordance with the Personal Data Protection Act of Thailand, in expressing profound sorrow at the passing of Her Majesty Queen Sirikit, the Queen Mother. Her Majesty's lifelong dedication to the well-being of the Thai people, her compassion, and her enduring contributions to sustainable development will remain an inspiration to us all. We respectfully invite all distinguished guests to observe a moment of silence in her honor. Please stand up. Thank you so much. Please take your seat. Your Excellencies, distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to today's seminar, Navigating Global Trade Shifts, Insights from UNCTAD Trade and Development and Strategic Implications for Thailand. Proudly organized by the International Institute for Trade and Development Public Organization, or ITD, in cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Commerce, Thailand, UN Trade and Development, and the Harvard Club of Thailand. I'm Pupe Chawarat Yongjiranon, and I'm honored to be your MC for this seminar that is both on-site here at the Foreign Ministry of Thailand and online to the rest of the world. Today's discussion takes place at a pivotal moment for today's global economy. We are witnessing geopolitical fragmentation, supply chain reconfiguration, and uneven growth patterns that are reshaping trade and development worldwide. This afternoon, we will explore how Thailand can strengthen resilience, upgrade competitiveness, and strategically position itself within evolving regional and global economic architectures. We will gain insight from the UNCTAD Trade and Development Report 2025 and a panel discussion on navigating global trade shifts, strategic implications for Thailand. And to begin our program today, it is with great honor that I invite to the podium Mr. Supakit Jarenkul, Executive Director of the International Institute for Trade and Development, to deliver the welcome and introductory remarks.
His Excellency Dr. Supachai Panishpak, former Secretary General of UNCTAD, former Director General of the WTO, and former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Commerce of Thailand, His Excellency Mr. Sihasak Phuongketkaew, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, Her Excellency Mrs. Supaji Suthampan, Minister of Commerce of Thailand, Your Excellencies, Ambassadors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and Sawasdee krab. It is my great honor and pleasure to welcome all of you to the seminar on the topic of navigating global trade shifts. Your presence here today with us reflects the importance of cooperation, dialogue at a time when global economy is changing rather quickly. It also reflects Thailand's commitment to remain actively engaged with partners around the world. We are especially honored to welcome Dr. Supachai Panishpak. Through his leadership in global trade and development, he has reminded us that trade must serve larger purpose, not only economic growth, but better opportunities and better lives for all. His vision and experience continue to inspire many of us working in trade and development today, and his lifelong contribution remains an important guide as we navigate today's changing global economy. Ladies and gentlemen, today global trade is shifting faster than ever. In the past, trade was mainly about efficiency and expansion. Today, trade is shaped by many new factors: geopolitics, financial conditions, technologies, and climate transitions. Countries around the world are adjusting their strategies, and businesses are rethinking how and where they operate. The UNCTAD Trade and Development Report 2025 helps us understand the moment better. The report suggests that the global economy is entering a period of adjustment, where resilience and cooperation become increasingly important. For Thailand, this is an important moment. In recent years, we have seen strong effort by the government to expand economic partnerships, strengthen trade relations, promote investment, and support new growth sectors. These efforts help position Thailand to respond to global changes and confidence. Based on the report what we see today, I would like to share 4 key shifts for us to consider. First, supply chains are changing. Companies now look not only at cost, but also the reliability and scalability. This creates opportunities for Thailand and ASEAN to attract investment and strengthen our role in regional production networks. Thailand's openness and connectivity remain important strengths in this new environment. Second, financial conditions have become more challenging. Higher financial costs affect businesses everywhere. Access to finance has therefore become a critical factor in sustainable trade, particularly for SME that form a backbone of our economies. In this context, trade finance plays an increasingly important role. Efficiency and accessibility to trade finance help businesses manage risks, maintain liquidity, and continue participating in global markets, even during periods of uncertainty. Strengthening trade finance ecosystem, including collaboration between finance institutions, development partners, and policy frameworks that support SME access, will be essential to ensure that trade remains inclusive and resilient. This is why continued efforts to support SME, improve access to finance, and strengthen economic resilience are so important for inclusive growth. Third, global standards are rising, especially in green and digital area. Many countries are introducing new requirements related to sustainability and data. Thailand's ongoing effort to promote digital transformation and green industry development will help businesses stay competitive in global markets. Last but not least, technology is changing how trade works. Digital platform, data, AI, and automations are reshaping industries. This makes investment in skills and innovation more important than ever before. Ladies and gentlemen, these changes bring challenges, but they also bring opportunities. This leads to the important question: how should Thailand and ASEAN move forward together? In today's global environment, progress comes from balanced, expanding partnerships while managing risks, moving toward higher value activities, and ensuring that businesses of all sizes can participate in global trade. In addition, strengthening regional cooperation in areas such as digital trade infrastructure, trade finance connectivity will help ASEAN businesses, especially SMEs, participate more effectively in cross-border trade. Improving access to financing, reducing transaction costs, leveraging digital solutions and trade finance can help transform opportunities into real participation in global markets. The digital and green transition are also reshaping competition. With the right preparations, this development can become opportunities for Thai businesses to strengthen their position in global markets. And at the same time, stronger connectivity and closer cooperation within ASEAN will remain essential. Because when ASEAN moves forward together, the region becomes more resilient, more competitive, and better prepared for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, at ITD, our role is to support these efforts by connecting knowledge, policy, and capacity building. Established in partnership with UNCTAD, ITD works closely with government agencies, businesses, and international partners to translate global insights into practical action for Thailand and region. Because in today's world, the greatest risk is not about shift or change itself, but being unprepared for it. Progress requires confidence, cooperation, and shared sense of direction. Today, Thailand moves forward with strong foundations, active leadership, and trusted partner across global community. by continuing to work together, government, private sector, academia, and international partners, we strengthen trade as a driver for growth, opportunities, and shared prosperity. Through cooperations, we build stability, support businesses, and create opportunities that benefit our people and our region. Thailand has long served as a connector between regions, markets, and ideas. This role remains important as we continue to strengthen openness, partnership, and mutual trust in the global trade system. Let us continue working together to ensure that trade remains open, inclusive, and beneficial for all. Because at ITD, we sincerely believe that together Thailand and ASEAN can move forward while building a more sustainable and prosperous future for our region. Once again, allow me to thank you, His Excellency Dr. Supachai Panishpak, His Excellency Mr. Sinasak Pongkekal, Her Excellency Mrs. Supaji Sutampan, and Your Excellency Ambassadors, for honoring us with your presence today. Your presence truly means a great deal to us. I would like to thank all speakers, panelists, participants for being part of this important event. And finally, I would like to express my appreciation to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Commerce, UN Trade and Development, and the Harvard Club of Thailand for their support in making this event possible. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณมากค่ะ Thank you so much คุณสุภกิจค่ะ for starting off this afternoon seminar. And as mentioned, definitely collaboration is key. And when you talk about trade, there needs to be collaboration with everyone here in the room, I'm sure. And so diplomacy is crucial when it comes to global trade. It's vital to gain insight on Thailand's diplomatic insight on navigating a more fragmented and strategically complex global landscape. So please join me in welcoming the next speaker. It's a great honor indeed to have His Excellency, Mr. Sihasak Pongkekal, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, deliver the opening speech.
ครับสวัสดีครับ Dr. Supachai Panishpak, former Secretary General of UNCTAD, Minister Supaji Sutampan, Minister of Commerce, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be here today, to join you today. I would like, first of all, to extend my appreciation to UNCTAD, the Ministry of Commerce, the International Institute for Trade and Development, and the Harvard Club of Thailand for co-hosting this international seminar. At the outset, I would like to express my great admiration for Dr. Supachai. It has been a privilege for me to work closely with him during my time as ambassador and permanent representative of Thailand to the United Nations in Geneva. And we all know that Dr. Supachai has been a strong voice for developing countries and a consistent advocate for an international economic order that is free, fair, and just. His vision continues to resonate strongly in the work of UNCTAD today. And to make our discussion, and that makes our discussion particularly timely, because the global economy is entering a period, as we all know, of profound change. Trade still remains a powerful engine of growth, but the environment around it is becoming more complex, more fragmented, and more uncertain. That is why UNCTAD Trade and Development Report 2025 is so relevant, and I must congratulate UNCTAD for launching this very timely and insightful publication. The report offers practical guidance for developing countries so we can navigate an increasingly complex and fragile global economy. One of its key messages is that trade and finance must go hand in hand. But today, many developing countries still face structural disadvantages in accessing finance. That is why stronger multilateral cooperation and a more integrated approach linking trade, finance, and development are now more important than ever, as the report rightly calls for. And these messages resonate strongly with Thailand. More than 2 decades ago, when Thailand hosted the 10th session of UNCTAD following the Asian financial crisis, the global conversation focused on poverty reduction and building productive capacity. Today, the debate, as you all know, has shifted. We see more inward-looking policies, rising protectionism, increasing use of economic tools, such as tariffs, for strategic purposes. Many have argued that these shifts point to de-globalization, but global trade itself has not declined. Trade volumes continue to grow. Instead, what is changing is the structure around it. Recent U.S. trade policy shifts have triggered a structural transformation in global supply chains and trade flows. In many ways, what we are witnessing is not de-globalization, but what some has described as re-globalization, which at its core is a strategic realignment of trade, production, and finance. For Thailand, this transition presents both risks and opportunities. It requires us to adapt not only our economic policies, but also our diplomacy here at the Foreign Ministry. This is why Thailand is placing emphasis on economic diplomacy. In today's environment, economic policy and foreign policy can no longer work in silos. They must reinforce one another. Foreign policy today needs to be multidimensional, inclusive, and go beyond Thailand. Economic diplomacy is therefore no longer just about market access. It is also about building trust, strengthening resilience, creating opportunities, and reaching out to new friends and partners that translate into real economic benefits. In simple terms, foreign policy must start at home and ultimately deliver results at home by improving people's livelihood and strengthening Thailand's long-term competitiveness. So the questions become, how do we do this in practice? Last month, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs launched an economic diplomacy strategy with 3 goals in mind. First, building confidence in Thailand. In today's environment, confidence matters as much as capacity. Investors and partners need confidence in rules, long-term direction, and most importantly, political stability. Thailand is therefore working to improve trade facilitation, modernize regulation, and align our policies with international standards, including sustainability and human rights. Our OECD ascension journey reflects this commitment. At the global level, Thailand also supports strengthening rules-based system. We've heard that so many times, the rules-based system, and advancing reform of the international financial architecture. But I wanted to underscore that rules governing trade cannot just be old rules and maintaining the status quo. We also need new rules that reflect challenges and opportunities of changing times. This will remain an important theme as Thailand hosts the IMF World Bank annual meeting in Bangkok later this year. Second, strengthening Thailand's competitiveness. Global trade shifts are opening new space for countries that are ready to adapt. In this context, Thailand's vision is to remain a reliable, forward-looking partner in the evolving supply chains. Our embassies and consulate around the world are now being mobilized to actively engage investors and partners to open doors for Thai SMEs and startups and to connect Thai businesses with new opportunities. At the same time, we are investing in future industries, including digital economy, aviation, and logistics, medical and wellness services, biotechnology, and robotics, while strengthening skills and human capital. Third and last is enhancing collaboration and partnership. The UNCTAD report reminds us that fragmentation carries real costs. No country can manage global shifts alone. Thailand, therefore, supports what the report calls the network multilateralism, building partnerships across regions among diverse partners. We, on our part, are expanding engagement with South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America, including through our Thailand Africa initiative. And we continue to strengthen regional cooperation through frameworks such as ACMEC, ACD, and BIMSTEC. But these goals cannot be achieved by one ministry alone. The Foreign Ministry will be working closely with Minister Supiti and the Ministry of Commerce as Team Thailand to ensure that our external engagement, trade policies, and economic vision move in the same direction. Diplomacy can open doors while trade policy create opportunities. Together, they help translate national strategy into real economic outcomes. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we are entering a period where economic growth is shaped not only by markets, but also by geopolitics and finance. Developing countries often feel these pressures most strongly. This makes international cooperation all the more important. UNCTAD continues to play a vital role in providing inspiration so that developing countries can take charge of their own destiny and navigate the shifts in the global economic landscape. But with less than 5 years remaining to achieve the SDGs and with a significant financing gap still to close, we do not have time to lose. Institutions such as UNCTAD must adapt to remain responsive and relevant. Thailand, I assure you, stands ready to work with all partners to ensure that trade and development remain engines of shared prosperity. I hope that we can use today's discussion not only to understand global trade shifts, but to shape them together and to shape our common future together. Thank you very much. ขอบคุณครับ
ขอบคุณมากค่ะ Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for your insightful address, highlighting the fact that economic diplomacy is quite important at this time, and Thailand being ready to work alongside the both ministries as we have here from the Commerce and the Foreign Ministries, shaping up for the new year. Well, now that we have had the diplomatic perspective, we move to Thailand's trade and commercial strategy amid shifting global supply chains and emerging economic architectures. We're honored to have our next guest speaker to give us her insight. It is with great honor that now I invite Her Excellency, Mrs. Supaji Suttampan, Minister of Commerce of Thailand, to deliver her opening speech. Please welcome her to the stage.
สวัสดีค่ะ His Excellency Dr. Supachai Panishapak, former Secretary General of the UNCTAD, His Excellency Sihasak Phongketkaew, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Chawaphat Ongmahathamongkol, President of Harvard Club of Thailand, Mr. Supakit Jarankul, Executive Director, the International Institute for Trade and Development (ITD), Excellencies, Ambassador, distinguished guests, esteemed delegates, and ladies and gentlemen, it is actually my great honor to be here with you today with a very important milestone of sharing the insight of the studies that the ITD has created together with UNCTAD of the report for 2025. I'm actually quite humbled to stand here in front of all the experts, particularly everything that I like to say already been covered by the previous speakers, His Excellency Sihasak. So I don't really know what to share more than what he just mentioned. So I probably like to reiterate that to work together as Team Thailand is very important this day because the world has been shifted and changed. Geopolitical has created a direct impact directly to geo-economical, and also being impact together with the climate crisis that we all face, together with the technology that we have been disrupted, and it could also be enabler for us to navigate the countries to the next level if we can apply and use those technology effectively. So all these forces that's put together has shaped and the country's positions to be a little bit different, I could say, than the previous time. Trade becomes very vulnerable. We need to position ourselves quite carefully on this kind of environment. And as His Excellency Sihasak already mentioned about the trade policies and also foreign policy that has to be together, it is something that we need to also understand where will be our position. While there's actually a lot of, I could say multipolar sort of world order right now, and it's become more extreme in polarization. So therefore, we actually been forced, all the country has been forced to trying to position ourselves well in this kind of environment. So therefore, Thailand has to also position ourselves well as well. While we need to also place focus on regionalization, which is actually become more and more important, because as a country, we cannot stand alone. We actually have to work hand in hand closely with our strategic partner, with all the regional partners, particularly in this region, ASEAN, I would say that. So therefore, as regionalizations become very important, at the same time, we also need to identify what would be our unique position in order for us to stand out in terms of how we could be the selected trade partners to everyone. So when we discuss about trade, it becomes, the trade policy, it's not about us and the other countries that we're talking to. we actually have to identify where would be the mutual benefit that the two countries can work together in the new supply chain. Because everyone could probably know very well that there is actually a lot of trade diversion right now. Many countries trying to find the new strategic partners. We also the same. So we need to identify what would be the area that we can identify of the mutual benefit, mutual agreement to the countries that we are discussing with. So therefore, we can be part of the puzzle or the jigsaw that is very important, that we can fulfill the supply chain for that particular countries that we work with. So trading is not about sell to the country, but it could be sell with and sell through. Like, there's some, countries that we have a lot of, the trades deficit with. There's also a lot of countries that we also have a very positive, the trade balance. So therefore, if we only look into us, between the two countries, it's going to be very important or very difficult for us to continue to increase our trade volumes to that particular country. But if we can identify the area that we could be, in the joint benefit area, we can also become a very good, important part in the puzzle or jigsaw to that particular countries that we can help in terms of their supply chain. So that is actually something that we need to identify and work with. And when we look into, the country like Thailand, we can also identify that we actually position ourselves as for the geographically as the heart of Asia. People, when they're going to trade, through us because we're actually in the middle of ASEAN and Asia. So therefore, we need to utilize those as our key advantage. And besides that, there would be a lot of policy that we need to relook into in order for us to provide convenience to people and investor who look for investment in the country to feel that they have find convenient, transparency, and all those, the skill that is required in order to fulfill those applications of investment requests that has been put into the country. And I'm actually quite pleased to see that last year we have seen a record high in terms of the request for investment in the country through the application for investment promotion. As you probably can see from the statistic, last year, the whole year, we actually have about 1.8 trillion baht as the requestment for the application of investment promotion to the country. And quite nicely, if you look into that particular figure, you will see that there's quite a lot of industry that's going to help us to shape ourselves to the new S-curve for the country. For example, we have seen quite a lot of investment requests for the data center, AI-related investment, the advanced technology like advanced semiconductor, like new generations of automotive, also in biotechnology, also in the future food processor. So all those are very key industry that would help us position ourselves to the next level of the new S-curve. So all of that 1.8 trillion baht for the investment request for application for investment promotion under BOI privilege, out of those, about 1.35, 1.36 trillion baht is actually foreign direct investment, which is actually something that would help us to navigate ourselves a little bit further. Because when we look into the growth of the economy in the country, we probably want to look into the investment from this sector and from this private sector. And also the other engine that could help us grow would be export. And when it's come to export, as I already mentioned to you, we need to position ourselves well when there is a lot of trade diversions happening around the world. So Team Thailand that Excellency Sihasak already mentioned is actually very, very important that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs together with Ministry of Commerce and perhaps, Ministry of Finance under the BOI, privilege scheme have to work hand in hand to ensure that we can attract and address those, interests to come to the country. So that are something that we need to work with. And also not only the geographic, important that we are located at the heart of Asia. That's also the other thing that we need to, consider as well. As you probably aware that currently we have active 14 free trade agreement. So therefore, those investment that come to the country could also enjoy the benefit of the free trade agreement. We have 3 more, agreement that we already signed, but not active yet. So we need to also ensure that this year we must ensure that we can, activate those additional 3, so it could become 17. The additional 3 that we already signed, but not actually make it effective yet, would be the Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and also AFTA, which is going to be a very important milestone because AFTA would be the first, stepping stone for us to get into Europe as well. And there's also a pipeline of a critical region or countries that we like to work with. This year we target also to trying to conclude the FTA discussion that we have with EU. For EU, we already have about 8 rounds of discussions, and it's actually have a very good progress, but still there's quite, a few areas that we need to conclude, and we hopefully that we can see those kind of, conclusion within a year. We also have target for South Korea. We also have the discussion ongoing with Canada, directly with Canada, although Canada has also the multilateral discussion with ASEAN as well. But there's also a connection that we like to also connect with them directly as well through the direct FTA with Canada. But all in all this FTA that we're talking about, be it that we already signed, we're about to make it effective, or the futures that we're going to sign, it has been signed in a different time, timeline. Some, of the FTA have been signed for more than 30 years, but trade, dynamic or trade landscape has been changed quite a lot, as you also know. So what we need to do is also to try to harmonize the FTA that we already signed. Whatever the sign, a few decades ago, we need to revisit and see whether that is still relevant to today, particularly some of the new area. For example, digital trades. This is also something that's very, very critical. And it's not mentioned, in that existing FTA that we've had with, long time ago. So to me, this is actually something that is not just that we have FTA active in the country. We must ensure that it stays relevant. So that is something that we need to also look into when it comes to export and when it comes to trade. The other thing that is also very important is it's going to be quite, not that, benefit to anyone. If those FTA that we sign, not many people use. And when we look into statistically on those FTA that already been signed, none of them actually has been, maximized or used at 100%. There's still a lot of private sectors, the companies, that not using the privilege or benefit of FTA that we already have. So one of the missions that we're going to maximize the export is to ensure that we train, we give the knowledge, we make awareness of this benefit of FTA to those, private sector, in order for them to maximize and utilize this FTA. So that's also another thing that we can work with. And just now I mentioned about digital trades. It's actually an opportune time because last year we actually achieved a very critical milestone within ASEAN. As you probably know, that ASEAN has an initiative called DIFA, digital framework economic agreement. That is actually going to be, the framework of the regions that work together based on a digital, the area. Example could be the standard, regulations, infrastructure, knowledge transfer, skill transfer, that could help us trade, among the countries within the region in order for us to optimize an opportunity. And it's going to give a very important, the objective, which is actually to provide inclusivity to the small and medium enterprise. Because, if we can trade, with the digital capability, those small and medium enterprise can enjoy the benefit of a region sort of market size. Thailand, we have about 60 plus million populations, declining as well. But if we look into ASEAN, we look into 600 plus million of people. So the trade volume can extend quite a lot. And, quite opportune time, as I mentioned, Thailand is actually a share to facilitate this DIFA to come to the conclusion. Last year during, ASEAN Summit, we achieved about 73% of the agreement of this framework agreement. Just recently, we achieved nearly 80%. And I believe that by April, which is actually the target, we should be able to complete the text, an agreement of this digital framework agreement for ASEAN. And if we can complete this, it's going to be the first region in the world that have this digital trade framework among these, the neighboring countries or member states. So we hope that by, the ASEAN Summit this year, at the, fourth quarter this year, we can, sign this agreement and make sure that it's become, active to all members. And what does it mean to us? We actually have a target together for ASEAN that we're going to increase the trade volumes among ourselves, from $1 trillion to double the size to $2 trillion. So that is very important. So let me try to conclude here is that it is also a challenging time, as Excellency Sihasak already laid out a very perfect landscape that we are, facing a lot of force coming from an outside, and also in the country, we need to also ensure that we have a stability to address all these, the shift and change that's happening. So therefore, we need to change the way we do things. When we look into trade, it's not trade alone. We cannot work in silo anymore. We actually have to work as a team of Thailand, and we work together with Foreign Affairs, we work together with Finance Ministry, and also we have to work with a lot of countries around the world with the positions that Thailand would be the trusted partner. Because personally, I feel that the most important currency in the world is trust currency. So if we provide trust as a trusted partners to all those who engage with us, trade with us, I believe that this is going to be a sustainable relationship instead of just one-way relationship. So with that, then it's about the trade, landscape that has been changed and shift, and the way that we're going to address those change. So now I come back to my speech. So I would like to reflect that the importance of today's seminar for the Ministry of Commerce is that it is truly an unmissable event, and I can ensure that it is actually a very important event, that the world is changing rapidly, as I already mentioned, and we have identified synergies in the Trade and Development Reports 2025 that align with the goals that Ministry aspire to achieve, is to remain an ally to all, guided by the four principles: openness, inclusiveness, mutual respect, and mutual benefit. So this is actually the report that suggests that we confront the new policy frontier forging climate economic resilience amidst multiple challenges for developing economies. A vicious cycle grips us. Rising climate costs fuel mounting debt, while creditor hike borrowing rates based on perceived higher risk. So this trap is pretty much limit growth and perpetuate inequality. So the report would center around finance, trade finance, which when we talk about reports like this or global landscape, not many people talk about trade finance, which I really pleased to see that this report would guide us through the trade finance area, because if we don't have finance, then it's going to be very difficult to complete the transaction, to complete the trade, supply chain. So this global imbalance demand action, national resolve paired with coordinated international efforts to enhance financial resilience, which serve as a key vehicle for driving trade predictability. So today, I hope you all gain valuable insights from the key findings of the UN Trade and Development experts and the panel discussion. I would like to extend my best wishes for the success of today's international seminar and the most enjoyable day to all participants. Thank you very much.
ขอบคุณมากค่ะ Thank you so much to Your Excellency. We have much indeed gained insight from you as well as the Foreign Minister in terms of how we do not stand alone, but actually we can identify our unique position with mutual benefits with our neighbors, whether it is in ASEAN or beyond. We now move on to the keynote address titled Beyond Globalization, Rethinking Trade, Finance and Development. In a fragmented and rapidly evolving global environment, as we mentioned earlier, this keynote will provide a forward-looking reflection on how trade, finance, and development must be rebalanced in what many describe as the post-globalization era. Please join me in welcoming our keynote speaker to the stage, His Excellency Dr. Supachai Pinichapak, former Secretary General of UNCTAD, former Director General of the World Trade Organization, and former Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Commerce of Thailand.
Excellencies, Minister Sihasak Phongket Keo, Minister Supaji Suthamapan, Excellencies, distinguished participants, dear friends and colleagues. I have to start off by expressing something which might not be always part of our launch of DDR, is that today's occasion is a very special one, in that the two ministers, Minister Sihasak and Minister Supaji, have greatly contributed to the importance of the event in the launching of our trade development report this time. And I greatly appreciate their presence and their contribution. Both ministers have said what needs to be said. What Minister Sihasak said covers the real area of work actually for the global diplomacy, which is economic diplomacy. We used to know diplomacy as political diplomacy, but this time the challenges facing all of us would demand what they call geo-economic solutions. And that would mean what Minister Sihasak has just laid out for us. What has not been said by Minister Sihasak has been completed by Minister Supaji. She fully covered the whole trade areas, which I'm very impressed by the breadth and length of areas that Minister Supaji has covered. And she mentioned two things that I think are very important. I need to bring out at the outset, because lest I might forget it as I go on with my own presentation. Minister Supaji mentioned trade diversion. This is now the order of the day. Diversion, diversities, friendshoring, reshoring. Minister Sihasak mentioned reglobalization. We had quite a number of meetings talking about that in the past couple of years. As people were talking about deglobalization, we try to stem the tide of deglobalizing by saying that no, this is just not a return to the old days of fragmentation, but just a change of course. And change of course can still mean that we can still doing globalization work, but better today than in the past. Second thing that Minister Supaji mentioned that is very important is the inclusion of the digital framework in our agreement. Because as we all have to cope with the digitalization of our economies, we have both hopes and fears. Hopes that digitalization will lead us to more efficiency in the way we work, more connectivity. Actually, it will lead to more globalization. One metric of globalization is connectivity. And digital connectivity will mean that we will be connected every second of the day. And so, rightly mentioned by Minister Supaji that it needs to be included in any FTAs that are coming, and for the archaic FTAs that have been long in existence, it is needed that we include the DIFA. Before I go on, I also have to thank Minister Sihasak for being so nice to me in saying nice things about me when I was in Geneva. But in fact, I'm very pleased to have had the opportunity to work with Minister Sihasak when he was the Thai ambassador there. And I think at one time, also representing the group of G77 and China as well, I think. And at the time that Minister Sihasak, at that time, Ambassador Sihasak was working in Geneva, I was having a lot of difficulties with the work not with UNCTAD, but with some membership of the UNCTAD. Because every time we go to our ministerial meetings, once every 4 years, quadrennial meeting, there will always be questions being raised by some of the membership, whether we should be doing the work that we've been doing on behalf of the membership or not. In those days, it was around 2010 and 12, something like that. It was in the aftermath of the Great Recession, 2008, which was caused by I have to be careful with the diplomatic term that I will use, caused by imprudent supervisory framework for financial institutions in some economies. The financial collapse that has been caused by the Great Recession in 2008 has caused great sufferings. Maybe not so for the more advanced economies, but for those of us that live in a less privileged world, in lower income economies, there was a lot of suffering. Because while we were doing greatly, particularly in Africa in those days with globalizing trends and doing export and imports, going through a purple patch, there was a break in that patch with the Great Recession. And UNCTAD and I took it upon us, we took it upon us to try to dissect the causes and consequences of what happened and try to report to our membership and to the world. But we were not actually encouraged by some of our members. I don't have to mention whatever names those days, but I had difficulty in trying to forge together certain agreements for our quadrennial meetings. And in that particular year, it was I think in Doha, somewhere in Doha. It was very difficult, and I need a lot of support from Ambassador Sihasak with his group of G77 and China in those days to be able to go through and to be able to arrive at the kind of conclusion and agreement that we have done. So just sorry for the digression, but I think it's important to say that, because what we are confronted with at this time of the day probably will look new and unprecedented to some of us, but I would say that we have gone through several circles of this kind of distractions from the main roads of globalization. I mean, if you have read Lord Keynes writing about globalization in the years before the First World War, before 1914, he was writing about the world that was globalizing, having tea in his bed, and biscuits and food around the world and everything. And lo and behold, after that, a few years after that, we had the First World War. So I give this information to you in the beginning so that we would not be daunted by what we see as challenges facing all of us. But I do feel I have great feelings, I mean, not really sympathies, but I think people like our two ministers here, the leaders of countries, policy makers, this is not a normal time, and the challenges facing them are massive, And if they are predictable, it will be one thing. But what we are facing at the moment are unpredictable challenges, unpredictable, unforeseen, all kind of uncertainties, volatility, and everything, as two ministers have already alluded to. So I do feel much for them, and that's why I'm very pleased that our own country, we have these two ministers, outstanding ministers, dedicated ministers working for us, really capable of facing up to all these challenges. So I'm very pleased to see this and to be able to listen to them, what they just said. I will have 3 more points to make, and I think I will do it quickly because after all the things that have been said, I don't need to repeat all this, but just to give you some of the, to me, my own conclusion as to the things that we confronted with, how we're going to do that. Is it going to be an existential threat? Does the World Trade Organization function? Will it survive all these challenges and the trends of all the ruptures around them? I will have 3 points to make. One about the resilience of all of us, that we need to bring up the quality of resilience. The second point of how trade will need to be going through a reconfiguration, how it's going to be done and in what ways. I might not have all the solutions, but I give a certain direction. And the third point will be the one that has been mentioned by the report on the brink, the TDR, which is the nexus between trade and finance. It seems natural, it seems automatic, but it's not. And it can create frictions and crisis if the connections between the two are not well regulated and managed. Things happen so thick and fast in the last few years. It may not be appropriate to mention the name, but I have to mention the name of Lenin. It came to my mind that he has just said something about that there are decades when nothing happens, and weeks that decades happen. This seems to me to be the last few years. So many things has happened, so many changes, and redirections have been brought to the table that we need to be able to stabilize ourselves, stabilize our country and economy in a way that we can meet these challenges. So my first point, last year, 2025, I went to Geneva thinking that we would be celebrating the 30th anniversary of the World Trade Organization. The WTO has already existed 30 years already. But then, boom, came the reciprocal tariffs, Liberation Day, and we were all downcast. We were all downcast. But we say, no, this is something that we must stand up and fight against the kind of, how would I say, mercantilistic tendency that the WTO should be able to deal with if we just gather our minds together and collectively, maybe someone missing out for some time, but collectively still we can deal with the issue. Last year, myself, my friends, colleagues in economic fields, we all made the mistake. We all make the mistakes. We thought the tariffs and the weaponization of economic instruments would lead to economic traumas and recessions and slow down. Beginning of the year, I think IMF said world trade would grow by 2 to 3% or 2.7%. Then gradually, with the new tariffs coming up, they said 2.2. I went to the WTO meeting and they said, no, it will be minus 0.2. So bad was it. But lo and behold, I think last year we ended up with the trade expansion globally around 3 to 2%, as mentioned in the report. But please don't be misled by the resilience of the global economy. Because there were a few factors last year that I'd like you to know. You might know it already, but just to repeat to you so that we will know that these factors will not be present again in 2026. There were 3 or 4 or 5 factors. One, there was a lot of what we call front-loading of trade. Because everybody knows that tariffs are coming. That was one predictable thing of President Trump. He announced before, I will do this, I will do that. So it was predictable that tariff will come, and not in 10s and 20s, in 20s and 40s and 50s. And so traders were front-loading orders, import and export. So that's why around the world, trade activities, instead of slowing down, just get work up, particularly in the first few quarters of last year. The second point is that last year's economy globally was very much supported by the massive AI investment. You remember, I don't have to mention all the big giants, NVIDIA, Microsoft, Alphabet. They made huge investment. I don't know, hundreds of billions of dollars per year. So that was very helpful to get the world economy going. The third point is that there was some reform in some government around the world. And of all reforms that I'm very pleased with is that the German government for a change who normally does not believe in domestic demand management. Last year they changed and they said we have to do domestic demand management, and they reformed their policies. They give spatial stimulus, fiscal stimulus. Very strange, very ironic for an economy like Germany. And that was helpful because Germany was reflating economy in the face of recession. Fourth point, the tariff that President Trump was announcing on the Liberation Day was supposed to amount to ultimately, on average for the whole year, to around 28%. 28-30%. What it came down to, the real increase, the real tariff rates that were applied was only 18%. So, it was hell. Some people use some terms that are not nice to President Trump, but I will not repeat here, but it seems like he's backing down, but no, but it's just the way of tactic of his negotiation that sometimes tariff rates were jacked up and sometimes it was reduced. It's up to the tactics of his geoeconomic policy. And the last one was the impact coming from the stock market. Last year, you remember stock prices, particularly in the United States, it's gone up quite aggressively. And sometimes, I think, fearfully. This is something that I have to mention along this line, that when you see massive investment and tremendous increase in stock valuations, people are now beginning to talk about whether we are now just sowing the seeds of some bubbles. If you read some economic business articles the last few months, you would see a lot of people trying to mention that we have to do this, we have to do that to avoid some of the bubbles. Because you know that most of the investment in AI are not done by equity issuance, but are done by borrowings. These are borrowed funds that are invested. And if the results of the investment in AI that do not lead to productivity increase in business doing, in business concerns and productivity and profitability increase, then something will happen. Then something will break down. And then that would ignite a chain that might lead to bubble. So just to remind you that this is the thing that we have to be careful. Now, 2026, we're not going to have all this extenuating circumstances. That will not be some of these factors that would help us. There would be the new EU, what they call carbon emission adjustment mechanism, sort of tax, border tax on products that have a lot of carbon emission. This is the EU thing that is going to be introduced this year, only introduced from January. So that's it. There will be the old Biden's time Inflation Reduction Act before this Trump second, that still will linger with us in the areas that there are still a lot of prohibition in trade in areas of technical goods, and in the level of tariff on electric vehicles from China to 100%. So all this and the lag effects from the tariff increase from last year will materialize in 2026. So, I mean, in the report of UNCTAD, it mentions also that this year we might see some moderation in the way that the global trade and income growth might be going through. Just this, so that we would know that we need to be resilient in a new way, because those factors might not be helping us. So I just leave with you some of the things that we would have to think of in the way we be able to face all these challenges this year. That at least we would have to be able to bring up our own effort, strengthen our own resilience from inside the country. Firstly, we need to do more domestic demand, not in a way of just distributing money. No, we need more investment in social areas. We need more investment in social areas. And this is not just valid for Thailand. For most of us in the developing countries area, social demand, social sectors like education, healthcare, old age people, and things like that. Secondly, we need to be keeping up the fiscal space, very important. We're not like the advanced economy, which can afford to have hundreds or 150% of their GDP in public debts. We are coming close to the limit of our public debts, which is not very large. But we need to have the space there. We need to have fiscal space, so we need to be able to adopt stimulating policies when the time comes, when there's some tension around the country or in the region, or when there's some untowards, the black swan coming from anywhere. We need to do some extra stimulus. We need to have fiscal space. We need to have the right kind, as Minister Supaji has already mentioned, the right kind of industrial policies. There are some key industrial areas that we need to promote, particularly related to technology and smart farming and things like that. And we need to have the right kind of industrial policies. And then lastly, we need to diversify. In the reports of UNCTAD, diversification is a key word. We need to diversify our products, diversify our markets, diversify our trading partners, and all this sort of thing. I'll go quickly to my second point of the trade and reconfiguration of trade. Now, let me say this. What has been said at the Davos meeting that our both ministers have attended, of course, will ring some bells. But they are not always, to my mind, the approach that I would like to see. Mark Carney, Prime Minister Mark Carney from Canada, he said that what we are seeing is a rupture. It's a rupture. It's not a transformation. It's not, from globalization to a little bit of less globalization and things like that. What we would like to see is the reorganization of connectivity. We still want to be connected, right? The matrix of connectivity, matrix of globalization can be counted as travel, information, technology. In other areas that we still be connected. But we might be less connected in terms that we would have not been able to do some of the multilateral agreements. But it doesn't mean that we cannot go back to the old system. Of course, we will not go back to the really old system, but the old system of globalization, if some parts could be reformed, UN could be reformed, WTO could be reformed, IMF, I think 80 years old, World Bank, 80 years old. We all need to be reformed, as every one of us would believe, would agree upon. So, I don't agree. I agree that it's a rupture, but I don't agree that we cannot go back to the old days. Not completely to the old days. Because in the old days, we thought globalization might solve the issues of poverty, issue of inequality, issue of literacy and all this sort of thing, monopoly and everything. No, globalization and growth in itself cannot solve all these issues, particularly inequality. We need social policies. We need fiscal policy, progressive fiscal policy is another thing. So, in a way, we try to do a reconfiguration of trade, and as a trade ministers meeting, the WTO's 14 ministerial conference, forthcoming next month in March in Yaoundé in Cameroon. I think that is just a place to start our discussion on how to do this reform of the whole trading system and also the World Trade Organization. And I agree, I don't want to repeat because it will cost you time, but you can go through, you can read the passage in the report, the TDR report, that presents a kind of development-led reform of the trading system. That trade has to serve not growth, not just the trade volume, but trade has to serve development, reduction of poverty, involvement of all people. Not only the major exporters, multinational firms, but as we all are thinking about the SMEs, the small traders, and how to link them, how to let them climb up the supply chain. Because we all talk about the supply chain and we stay at the lowest end of the supply chain, and we never get beyond that. So how we can get to the high end, how we can graduate from product cycle to another product cycle. How can we do what we have been trying to work, and I've been trying to work while I was at the WTO, something which would bring the less privileged participants, members of the WTO, the developing countries, that they would be able to abide by the spatial and differential treatment, the SDT. For those of you who do not have this information, SDT will give spatial privileges to poorer countries to have some concessions in certain areas of trade agreement. They may have to have more time to be able to liberalize their trading regime. They may need to have more time to adjust the way they accept certain agreements, like TRIPS and TRIPS, the trade agreement on intellectual property rights and things like that. So we need to give some development concerns to the poorer countries that may not be able to measure up to the agreements that we'll be doing at the level of the World Trade Organization all the time. We need also to be able to work on the proposal coming from the WTO MC13, the one before, 2 years ago, that we need to have certain system to manage crisis together, in time of crisis. It was already broached at that meeting, and we need to go on and see how we can manage together to keep the line of trades functioning all the time. The supply chain can be moved, maybe, but then still alive, like we did during the time of COVID. We need to be able to work on what Minister Supaji has already mentioned, networked multilateralism. I have said many times we have to be able to manage multipolarity without multilateralism well. We have to be able to manage that. Multipolar world is a fact of life. Multilateralism is something we cannot leave behind. We need it. Although some of my colleagues have been saying that we're now going to live with multilateralism -1. I said I would keep to multilateralism minus. So, but the rest of us will have to go on and try to manage with a rule-based system. I like what the other day the EU president of the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, she came out and she said something which I have to quote her. It was at the end of the trade deal between EU and India, between the second largest and the fourth largest trading nation in the world. It's one of the largest trade deals ever in this world. And she said, we deliver the mother of all trade deals, the mother of all trade deals. I think this is a sign of the time. We are going to see more of this kind of a mega trade deals, and the one that has been proposed or mentioned by Prime Minister Mark Carney the other day was between EU and CPTPP. It's something which is maybe a little bit far-fetched, but I think it's an idea that we can work towards. EU with CPTPP. And for me, CPTPP with RCEP, if RCEP and CPTPP can be merged together, or if the original APEC proposal, Chinese plus APEC proposal of the Free Trade Area of Asia and Pacific, FTAAP, that was something also as a mega deal. So this will be a new reconfiguration, localization of the trade deals, but at a more global, multilateral level. The last point that I would like to make on finance and trade. Well, everyone knows trade, finance, it's a Siamese twin. The concern that this report raised is something that we should be aware of. In that, while we are working very hard on trade agreement, trying to shore up food prices in the way that food-producing countries can earn their living from selling farm products. At the same time, we need to be able to manage the mechanism of finance that will be fed into the network of trading system, particularly for commodities, and food commodities are very important in that. Because why? Because traders these days, the major one, commodity traders today are becoming more and more, I would call, like shadow bank. You remember shadow bank from the days of the 2008 the Great Recession? The shadow banks that produce a lot of securitization of loans and derivatives, so much so that nobody knows what's happening. And same thing is being done today with the trade in commodities, commodity futures, derivatives, just to make sure that they maximize their financial gains in the areas of financialization of trade, not to allow countries that live on their exportation of food commodities. And the pricing system that has been distorted by the derivatives has sent the wrong signals to several countries around and has influenced the pricing of commodities on the normal food markets, as we've been saying. I will not use more of your time, but just to mention that these days and age, because of the traders becoming more shadow banking, and they are doing the trade financialization of the commodity markets for own benefits, we have to have authorities, and the authorities have to be very much alert to this kind of activities. Last suggestion for me, proposal. ASEAN had a very good financial agreement way back in 2000 called Chiang Mai Initiative. Later on, it was expanded into Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization. So instead of having swap line at the central bank level, it's become multilateralized. It's not only a swap, bilateral swap, it's a multilateral swap. So these swap lines will be very crucial, very useful when you have the kind of impact, financial impact repression at the global level. I would like to see activation of CMIM, and also to task CMIM with a little bit of the short-term financing on trade, to be seeing whether they could come up and do something to support the trade financing, and be alert as to whether we are being misled by the securitization of all these things. The second point is that I have proposed this decades ago. I still believe in it. We need to have our own Asian Monetary Fund, AMF. IMF, good, leave them be, let them be. I can't change IMF. I don't think the world can change IMF. I want it to be changed. But I want Asia to have our own Asian Monetary Fund. You know, 2/3 of global savings come from Asia. We save for the whole world. And we send our savings to be invested everywhere in the world. Particularly, we bought a lot of treasury bonds from the United States. This day, we are selling this bond. Well, that doesn't matter. But what matters is that we save a lot. When we save a lot, we used to be blamed that because we save too much, our economies are not growing. It's not true. Don't believe in that. Good that we save. But we need to have our own system of monetary agreement to look at the stability, exchange rates, and all this sort of thing, deficit, and so that we would not have to depend all the time for the sometime, well, I will not use the word ill advice, but some of the wrong advices from somebody else elsewhere who do not know so much about the Asian conditions. Last point is that we have our own export-import bank. This is the time to build resilience with diversification. Export-import banks throughout the world, including our own, need to be activated because they can help for exporters to take adventurous routes into new areas of trading. And Exim Bank can help to give export guarantee that would help, and particularly for the small traders. This would be of great help if Exim Bank could be capitalized even more stronger and expanded their coverage of guarantees to include particularly the SMEs. I have covered areas which I think being dealt with in this report. I cannot fully do the honor of expressing everything that the report did, but I think the tone of our discussion today and the things that I have said to try to pave the way for the new, I would say, the reorganization or reglobalization of our global system would work out well. And we still have hopes. I would not give up hopes of having the route back to our globalization, but it will be this time the development-led globalization. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
ขอบคุณมากค่ะ Your Excellency, I'd like to invite you to remain on stage as we're going to commemorate today with a special photo session. Indeed, we are very much honored to have all of our speakers to open today's seminar in terms of the massive challenges that lay ahead for Thailand, the region, and the rest of the world. It is an assurance to know that today we are stepping into something quite new, whereby the Thai team is ready to not only work within the country, but also within the region and the rest of the world to, you could say, navigate or steer in a global economy that is quite new. All right, to start off the first photo session, I'd like to request the presence of His Excellency, Mr. Sihasak Phongket Gao, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Thailand, to go on stage. Please give him a hand. Along with that, we'd like to re-invite Her Excellency, Mrs. Supaji Suthampan, Minister of Commerce of Thailand. Along with Kun Wishawat Isara Pakdi, Vice Minister, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And along with that, we'd like to invite Dr. Kirita Phao Pichit, Vice Minister of the Ministry of Commerce of Thailand. As well as Kun Ek Siri Pitaruchi, the Permanent Secretary of the Foreign Affairs of Thailand. And Kun Chawapad Ong Mahat Mongkon, the President of the Harvard Club of Thailand. And last but not least, Kun Supakit Jarangun, the Executive Director of the International Institute for Trade and Development. Thank you to all of our honorable, distinguished guest speakers and also guests for participating in today's seminar. We'd like to thank all of you for enlightening us, not only for the present report that we are about to hear further in details later today, but also drawing the attention of the importance of navigating today's challenges not alone, but together in a, you could say, reorganized and more efficient way amidst the ever-changing challenges that we see in trade. And definitely very exciting indeed. Thank you so much. We'd like to now invite, okay, just one more movement, okay. There you go. We're very much full of knowledge today, and I think there's a lot of anticipation to learn more about the report and to come. Would you one more go? เอาอีกไหม เอาอีกรอบหนึ่งไหม ไม่เอาเนาะ โอเคนะคะ right? โอเคค่ะ ขอบคุณมากค่ะ ทุกท่านนะคะ I'd like to invite all of our special distinguished guests to come to the front of your seats, please, because we are so appreciative of all of the ambassadors and distinguished diplomats that have come today. So we'd like to get a group photo, if we may, with all of you, and with the photographer on the stage here. We'd like to invite all of you to perhaps maybe stand up a little bit. Yeah, maybe stand up, naha. Yeah, so then we can see your faces and have a group photo. We always need to have one of these things in any occasion, indeed. We're so happy that you have given us your time to be with us here at the Foreign Ministry of Thailand. We'd like to thank again to all of our guest speakers who opened the remarks today in a day that we look forward to in the working together, learning more about trade, not just as a one-way direction, but as a mutual beneficial relationship with all of our countries represented here today. I'm sure we want to capture this moment here as we are set to learn more details about the UNCTAD report, as well as a panel discussion delving into the challenges that's not only facing Thailand, but also the rest of the world. How are we doing with the photographers here? ดีไหมคะ All smiles? All right, thank you so much, Ka. Thank you so much. Please take a seat. We'd like to thank all of our distinguished speakers, guests, and invite you to continue on with our seminar here. I'm sure a lot of you are interested in networking. We're going to take a 5-minute break. The program will resume soon in 5 minutes. See you then, Ka. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the next session is about to start soon. Please make your way to your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, we'd like to invite you back to your seats for the next session. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to now turn to the next session for today, the UNCTAD Trade and Development Report 2025 Insights, delivered by online distinguished experts from UN Trade and Development. In today's era of financialization, global trade flows are increasingly influenced by financial cycles, interest rates, and investor sentiment, creating heightened exposure to currency volatility and credit shocks, particularly for emerging markets. We are indeed honored to have our speakers today who will help us reflect on 2025 and prepare us for what's to come in 2026. We're pleased to welcome Dr. Anastasia Nesvetelova, the head of the Macroeconomic and Development Policies Branch, Division on Globalization and Development Strategies, UN Trade and Development, and Dr. Nicholas Maestri, Senior Economic Affairs Officer of the Division of Globalization and Development Strategies of UN Trade and Development. Please welcome them to the stage.
Your Excellencies, esteemed colleague, friends, it is a great pleasure for me and my colleague Dr. Nicholas Maestri to introduce our latest Trade and Development Report to such an important audience for UNCTAD at a pivotal moment of global transition. We truly appreciate this invitation by ITD and the central attention given by the Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Congress of Thailand to TDR 2025. It is also an honor for us to share the stage today with Dr. Supachai, who has been an exceptional visionary in his role as the Secretary General of UNCTAD a few years before. The intellectual affinity and links between ITD and UNCTAD go back more than 25 years. During this period, we have had a rich collaboration across key areas of research on the global economy, growth, integration strategies of developing countries. It is important for us to capitalize on these connections in the context of global fragmentation and the risks that so many speakers today have already highlighted. In 2025, we continued to analyze the transformation rather than the end of globalization. Economic globalization has shifted from what is known as high integration phase to a period where regionalization and fragmentation coexist. At this current inflection point, structural, technological, financial, geoeconomic, and policy changes combine into complex and overlapping shocks. How resilient are the developing countries to the combination of profound historical transformations and ongoing policy changes and new risks? Our answer to this question is based on three arguments. First, resilience is not merely a quality of individual entity, be it a sector, a country, or a market. As Dr. Supachai today mentioned, it is a characteristic of a complex system that describes its ability to absorb shocks, adapt to new contexts, and transform into something new rather than return to an old equilibrium. In our focus on systemic resilience of the global economy, we have focused on the intersection between global trade and financialization, taking a very specific angle on the structural position of Global South in the highly financialized global economy. We find that the enhanced role of developing economies in the global economy today is a key factor that has helped sustain the resilience of 2025. Collectively, the economies of the Global South contributed around 70% of GDP growth in 2025. Today, they account for over 40% of world trade and global GDP and more than half of FDI inflows. In 2025, South-South trade has once again surpassed global trend. Trade within the BRICS economies has grown sixfold since 2000 and is above the global trend again. However, these trends do mask divergences. A significant structural gap between the diffuse network of world trade and a dollar-anchored centralized system of global finance can pose an impediment to resilience and integration strategies of developing countries in particular. New challenges of service-led economies, artificial intelligence, digitalization, and financialization deepen the wealth divide and accentuate the divergence within the Global South itself. Second, the policy discourse of 2025 was dominated by tariffs, but the transformation of the global order extends far beyond tariff measures. We have examined complex interdependencies through the concept of the financial cycle in trade and pinpointed how policy shifts in asset prices, US dollar rates, and risk perceptions affect trade cycles. We found that the global financial cycle is increasingly dominant in trade, but country and sector level differences of this correlation require further investigation. While our worst case scenarios for the global world haven't materialized, we warn about the fragility of its macroeconomic foundations. The resilience of growth and trade in 2025 are unlikely to last into 2026. Economic growth has entered a prolonged low growth phase, stabilizing at around 2.6%, below pre-pandemic levels and significantly lower than the growth rates experienced in early 21st century. While developing economies' contribution to global GDP has risen, they face higher financing costs, greater exposure to sudden shifts in capital flows, and growing climate-related financial risks. These factors restrict fiscal and investments policy space necessary to sustain growth. Particularly vulnerable economies face additional burdens of up to 20 billion per year to cover increased debt costs associated with the climate crisis. Against this backdrop of complex macro foundations, we identify several specific risks facing the world in 2026 that merit policy attention. The first risk is the trade-finance mismatch. Global trade has become highly diversified since 2007. Developing economies have greater footprint and connectivity in international trade, with Thailand today being one of the most diversified economies internationally, both in the range of its trade partners and in the structure of its exports. In contrast, the global financial architecture is increasingly concentrated within the dollar system and a handful of advanced economies, leaving developing countries vulnerable to external shocks. Indeed, despite the efforts by states to reduce the dollar component of central bank reserves over the past 20 years, the dollar continues to anchor global trade and financial transactions, with no apparent alternative emerging across its many functions of a global financial anchor. To further sustain efforts to build resilient economies and expand regional integration, policies of financial deepening and regional capital markets are needed to complement macroeconomic frameworks and trade diversification efforts. Here, Thailand's participation in Project mBridge can provide timely and valuable policy lessons to other countries on central bank collaboration and trade finance integration within regional and inter-regional projects. The second risk is debt. Financial risks have worsened debt burdens, with 35 of 68 low-income economies in debt distress. As global financial conditions tighten, refinancing pressures rise. Climate shocks lead to reconstruction borrowing, increasing costs, and shrinking fiscal space, exacerbating debt burdens for developing countries. Together, these risks threaten future global financial stability. Achieving climate resilient structural transformation will necessitate more debt, which is unrealistic under current financing arrangements and requires a fundamental reform of the international financial architecture. The third area of risks concerns the financialization of commodities. It is especially evident in food trading, where a few dominant firms source, process, and transport commodities to global buyers. Deep integration of food trading monopolies within capital markets raises concerns about macro-critical risks. By engaging in various financial activities, trading, investment, securitization, commodity traders today have effectively become non-bank financial institutions or shadow banks. Such expansion raises prudential financial stability and illicit financial flow issues, adding to concerns of antitrust authorities. We call on regulators to modernize oversight to ensure market stability. Competition policy tools and cross-market approaches to systemic risks should take a more prominent role in policy frameworks. And finally, in a tightly interdependent system with a high degree of concentration, the risk of a cascade of crises stemming from external shocks, be they technological, geopolitical, or geoeconomic, remains high. Drawing policy lessons from our analysis, we emphasize the need for better coordination, comprehensive data collection, and open communication. It is clear that in the face of multiple uncertainties, policymakers require a holistic framework for analysis and policy tools. Trade policy, financial integration, and development strategies must be rethought in light of emergent geoeconomic risks, but also opportunities for developing countries. While the global order is at a moment of inflection, this also represents an opportunity for a recalibration of development and integration strategies. These tasks can most effectively be addressed not individually, but through an open dialogue and policy coordination at the multilateral level. With this, I really extend my special thanks to this audience and to the organizers for letting us hear the views expressed before by esteemed speakers. With this, I thank you for your attention, and I hand the screen over to Dr. Nicholas for a zoom in on trade cycle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anastasia, and good afternoon, everyone. It's also my pleasure to participate virtually to this very impressive meeting. And today I'd like to zoom in a little bit more on recent trade dynamics, because as we all know, trade ranks very high in policy agenda these days. And all the previous distinguished speakers already expressed many concerns about the current situation. Now, to avoid repeating what has been said, I would like, during my address today, to say a few words on an underexplored topic that also matters for trade. More precisely, the original research we conducted in UNCTAD shows that trade is not immune from the global financial cycle, and that changes in financial risk aversion or foreign exchange or credit condition can also significantly influence trade flows for manufactured goods and beyond. And failing to better understand this crucial dimension, risk placing trade flows at the mercy of negative financial spillover, and this could add to an already challenging environment. Now, before turning to this topic, let me start by reviewing with you the recent trend and to provide UNCTAD perspective on the current juncture. After some phase of acceleration and deceleration of world trade after the COVID-19 shock, we saw that world merchandise trade regained some dynamism during the last quarter of 2024, and especially during the first months of 2025. preliminary estimates suggest that world merchandise trade grew in real term at above 5% in 2025, which is 1.5 percentage point faster than the expansion of global economic activity. Now, as it was already mentioned, considering the numerous trade policy measures that has been announced last year, such resilience was somehow very surprising. And in our view, this better than expected trajectory reflect several factors Dr. Supachai already emphasized during his speech, being like front-loading activities, AI investment, but also exceptions and carve-out after the initial announcement of the US tariff measure, and maybe also some temporary and not necessarily long-lasting gain in financial market. Now, given the protracted uncertainties and temporary forces that supported trade in 2025, we don't expect merchandise trade to we don't expect that trend to continue, and we expect world merchandise trade to decelerate slightly in 2026, probably more or less at par with the growth of global economic activity. Now, turning to the financial channel of trade, let me stress first that the lack of emphasis on such topic is surprising, because outside barter, any cross-border exchange of goods always involve financial transaction. And in real life, financial transaction linked to trade can be many, as trade requires all kinds of guarantee and insurance schemes, as well as short-term credit provision and so on. Now, part of this trade-related financial transaction relate to what is referred as trade finance. Yet, the exploratory research we conducted in the Trade and Development Report 2025 uncover several other key financial channels that can affect trade flows. Our findings partly echo other recent studies, like the one that was conducted by BIS Economies, who found that when the dollar appreciates, world export, but also the export to the United States alone, tend to slow. And this is partly due to the fact that some exporters are reliant on dollar-funded bank credit. Hence, when the dollar appreciates, their balance sheets deteriorate and their hedging costs rise. And this is one concrete example of how some financial movement can affect trade. But there are others. With the aim to conduct a more holistic approach, we thought it was appropriate to start our macroeconomic exploration by looking at the link between the global financial cycle and trade, or more precisely, its cyclical component. So I will get back to the concept of the global financial cycle in a few slides, but for the time being, I would like you to remember that the global financial cycle is a statistical construct that captures common fluctuations in financial activities. Statistically, this measure is based on more than 800 asset prices related to credit condition, risk-taking, capital flows, leverage, and so on. And out of all these 800 series, a common factor can be captured, and that's what you see here on the screen. Now, in the report, we discuss more about its movement over time, but as you can see here, you can also already identify some up and down that might be important. Now, turning to trade, we also extracted from the original world merchandise monthly trade flows the cyclical component by subtracting its trend, as the following sequence of slides visually shows. So we took the differences between the evolution of trade and its trend, and that's what we get here, the residual, and then we standardize that measure to ultimately get what is called a detrended and standardized series of world trade. Now, interestingly, when we put together the global financial cycle with this detrendant and standardized series of world trade, we get two series that move closely together. And the correlation between those two series is about 0.5, which is far from being negligible. And these commonalities between the two series suggest that global financial condition and world trade are heavily interlinked. Now, digging deeper, we identify some key drivers that are behind this co-movement. And more precisely, the research on the global financial cycle has emphasized that there are three interlinked elements that tend to drive the global financial cycle, which is the foreign exchange, and because of the prominence of the dollar, the specific movement of the specific currency. Now, the second factor is the monetary policy by leading central bank. And here again, in practical terms, this boils down primarily to the United States Federal Reserve's policy due to its capacity to influence global credit conditions. And the third factor, which is key to drive the financial cycle, is the risk aversion among financial actors in key financial market, and that we proxy to the what is called the VIX or index, or the fear index that you might have heard of. Now, a second natural step to better understand how this financial shock could spread from the financial sphere into tangible trade and production outcome was to isolate and quantify each of these three components specifically through an econometric analysis that is based on the vector autoregression model. Obviously, I won't go into the detail of all that with you today, but here I just show and illustrate how a rise in financial risk aversion coincides with a decline in merchandise trade. In other words, financial turbulences on its own can hamper trade, and this adds to the monetary or exchange rate effect that we also capture throughout our analysis. Also, what is also important to notice here is that if you compare the two panels, which are about world trade or global industrial production, you will see that the effect of a rise of global risk aversion tend to affect trade much more. Now, turning to the role of the dollar fluctuation, our finding depicted here, reveal how global industrial production and world trade react when the dollar appreciates. More precisely, a 1% appreciation of the US dollar vis-a-vis a trade-weighted basket of foreign currency coincide with a steady decline of global trade volume of about 0.6% after 6 months. And this could offset part of the growth of world trade that would have taken otherwise. So at present, obviously, the US dollar is more on a depreciating path, but if there is no guarantee that such trend will continue, and especially if financial turmoil takes place. Now, before closing, I would like to stress that our research suggests that trade in manufactured goods is much more closely related to the global financial cycle than, for instance, primary commodities. And partly for this reason, emerging market Asian economy are much more exposed than other developing regions to the global financial cycle. Now, this finding is particularly relevant for Thailand, given its export structure, and I look forward to hearing from the next speakers on how these dynamics resonate with their daily work on the ground. Thanks again for giving us the opportunity to present our report in front of such a distinguished audience, and looking forward for the rest of our discussion. Thank you very much.
Much to Dr. Nesvitelova and Dr. Maestri for their valuable insights. Despite them being online, of course, I'm sure a lot of us have gained a lot of knowledge and confirming what was spoken earlier by our honorable speakers this morning. Now, we're going to move on to our panel discussion on the topic of navigating global trade shifts, strategic implications for Thailand. In this session, we'll explore how Thailand can enhance economic resilience, strengthen competitiveness, and strategically integrate into emerging global economic architectures amid ongoing disruptions. So may I now invite to the stage our distinguished panelists, starting with Ms. Ruchikon Sengjan, Director General of the International Economic Affairs Department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Along with her, we'd like to invite Mrs. Oramon Saptawitam, Director General of the Department of Intellectual Property, Ministry of Commerce. And Mr. Aaron Batten, the Country Director of Thailand Resident Mission of Asian Development Bank. As well as Dr. Sheila Lakatos, the Senior Economist of World Bank Group. And I'm very honored to be the moderator for this session. Now, we have had a lot of various speakers coming up talking about the, you could say, reorganization of globalization and what's to look forward to in 2026. And I'm very excited to talk with each of our speakers here today because we did have a chat before. And we have a range, as you can see here on stage, of different topics and aspects, whether it is in terms of trade, in terms of intellectual property rights, or of course, the World Bank perspective. So let me first start. You had some pictures. Okay, let's first start with the first question, and that is the UNCTAD report. Yes, we've heard about how there is growing protectionism, industrial subsidies, and security-driven trade policies reshaping global flows. But Kun Ruchikon, how should Thailand reposition itself amid the rising trade fragmentation and geopolitical blocs?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I go through the report, and there's a sound coming into my ears that, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We are experiencing turbulence. Please return to your seat and fasten your seat belt. In case of emergency, if you travel with the kids, please wear your oxygen mask first before helping them. So this is give me a sense of turbulence, the sense of economic, global economic that we are living now. And this gives me a sense of fear, a fear of private sectors, business sector, and MSME, whether they will survive or crash. And this gives me a sense of responsibility of the pilot who must navigate accurately and give a timely early warning to the passengers. And lastly, it gives me a sense of the duty of diplomacy to give our country an accurate navigation and timely early warning as well. So this is the picture that I feel for the global economy turbulence right now. So what we are going to take a look at the situation. We are seeing the massive surge in industrial subsidies that distort the global playing field. You would see that from the report, the industrial subsidies reached their highest level in 2023 since the 2008 financial crisis. And total subsidies exceed $100 billion, which represent 1.3% of firm revenue. So these are not just the numbers. They are representing the fundamental shift away from the spirit of the WTO Marrakesh agreement and the agreement on subsidies and countervailing measures. We see a world where the United States has withdrawn from 66 international organizations where unilateralism, which always disguised as national security, is becoming a new norm. So how do we live with it? My answer to this is to repositioning ourselves, repositioning Thailand in 3 points. First, we repositioning through the diversification of FTAs and economic partnership. Second is to avoid the over-dependence and safeguarding our autonomy. And the third is also to manage our risk. So I walk you down to the first point on the diversification of FTAs and economic partnership. We are actually moving, we have the 14 FTAs in place, And we are negotiating with the Thailand EU negotiation and also the FTA with South Korea. Actually, under current China's host year of APEC, the Chinese economy is bringing back the FTAP or FTA of the Asia Pacific to the table. So this FTAP is not new. We have championed this momentum from our host year in 2022 APEC host. We are expecting to see how it goes in APEC under China host year. Actually, we also look at CPTPP through our geopolitical lenses. We see our number of members now, total 12, with the United Kingdom being the latest one. In our ASEAN friends, we see that China and Singapore have become members. And next in queue are the Philippines and Indonesia. So this reminds me of what Prime Minister Mark Carney said, that if you are not at the table, you'll be on the menu. So this is the lens that I see through the geopolitics of CPTPP. My second point is avoiding the over-dependence and safeguarding our autonomy. You see the intensifying strategic competition between the United States and China. This creating a fractured landscape of trade and technology flow. In this context, we actually looking at case study of the European Union, which said that one market for one Europe. I think it serves as a case study that a bloc can enhance internal resilience and also competitiveness to cope with the global uncertainty. Thailand therefore must adopt a proactive mindset, strengthening our own national resilience and safeguarding our strategic autonomy so that we are never forced into a corner by any single geopolitical bloc. We should also doubling down on our multi-track approach. We must deepen our cooperation and business engagement with China and India. These are not only the big markets, but they are also the epicenter of the 21st century growth. By enhancing this connection, we would like to ensure that our economy remains anchored in the world's most dynamic regions. At the same time, we are expanding our horizons to new frontiers. Last December, our government has renewed Thailand Africa Initiative, as mentioned earlier by our foreign minister. This is actually a strategic bridge that we are trying to work on. We would like to diversify into South Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America as well. We would like to ensure that Thai businesses has a home in every corner of the world. My last point on repositioning, we need to manage the risk. Actually, what we have been doing for a long time is as a bridge builder or connector between multilateralism. But to manage the risk, which is we look at the economic structural reform. Right now we are moving forward the OECD accession, and we see it as the transformation journey and a rigorous process of reform. Last December, we have submitted what it called initial memorandum to the OECD and also signal our commitment to anti-bribery convention. So this is a major milestone that we are moving forward the OECD accession. What I would like to mention is that we would like to manage what we call standard risk by being at the table where the highest standards are set. So if we can access to the OECD, we are not just the rule taker, but we are going to be the rule makers in terms of standard. On the diversification, in a bit that we see that the world is moving, everyone is finding new friends. And if you are using the social media, you will just click add friends. So we are looking for new friends and diversify. We are also becoming the partner country of BRICS. This to diversify our market, our opportunity as well. I would like to bring you back to a little bit to our home in terms of risk management. We are facing AI as a game changer, and also demographic change, aging society, shortage of labor. So our government has the new labor program last October that we enable about 42,000 long-staying displaced persons in 9 temporary shelters along Thailand-Myanmar borders to access lawful employment. This is a strategic move to address the critical labor shortage in the key sectors like electronics and agriculture. We see that about 6,000 employers asking for these laborers. So we're expanding the productive workforce and demonstrating how we could be responsible and inclusive policy can serve both humanitarian and economic objectives. So I think I will stop here.
Well, you know, I mean, the question I gave you, it's a big one. So obviously, it's exciting to see that even though, despite Kun Supachai saying that there are challenges that are ever changing, not every day, within the day itself, it's really exciting to see what Thailand, the Thai team, is going to do for 2026. And just wanted to give a note to our audience or people online. If you have any comments or questions, you can put it in the online chat. If we have time, we'll try to address it within today. If not, it's okay. We'd like to hear from you. And just getting back to our conversation here, as what you mentioned and what has been mentioned this morning is that we need to work on all aspects. So one important aspect is intellectual property, right, Kun Oramon? Because the TDR 2025 has noted that while developing economies account for a growing share of the global trade, they capture, if you take a look at it, it's not very proportionate in terms of the share of value, particularly when it comes to IP-intensive activities. How can Thailand's IP framework help domestic firms move beyond, participation towards value capture in the global value chains?
So good afternoon, everyone. Taking from DG Ruchikon has mentioned that we are now facing, on the plane, facing turbulence, and captain say that tight your seat belt. And I think I already have a good captain. I tied my seat belt, and I know that the issue of intellectual property will make us, land safe and sound. So TDR 2025 point out that future trade will move on tariff in merchandise trade and shift towards trade in intangible assets. They also show that advanced economy dominate the large surplus and developing economy captures disproportionately small share. So when we talk about intangible asset, I presume that it seems that intellectual property play a crucial part in here. IP has come into picture and become more important in value capture. This is also confirmed when we look at some international economic index, such as Global Innovation Index by World Intellectual Property Organization or WIPO, or World Competitiveness Ranking by IMD. We can see that countries that have high score in scientific infrastructure and also factors that relate to intellectual property, such as number of patents registered domestically and internationally, R&D expenditure, IP licensing expenditure, and IP licensing receipt also have high score and good ranking. So it seems that high performance in these areas correlated with high national ranking. So what if we need to strengthen Thailand, intellectual property framework in order to help our country and business sector move towards capture in global value chain? I think it is unavoidable that we strengthen Thailand IP value chain. So what is IP value chain? IP value chains cover 4 strategic pillars. The value chain describes how ideas and innovation and creativity transform into legally protected assets, and then also convert into economic value through commercialization. IP owners also need to protect their rights through IP enforcement. So I think IP value chain is important in the economic infrastructure that enable value captures. I would like to share, that if Thailand, if we want to survive and we focus and concentrate on strengthen IP value chain, we need to talk about 4 strategic pillars, namely IP creation, IP protection, IP commercialization, and IP enforcement. So on IP creations, I'm very glad that I was invited by the organizer to talk on the issues of my responsibility, because I come from Department of Intellectual Property, Ministry of Commerce of Thailand. So on IP creation, I think my office, we have worked to try to support SME and business on IP knowledge and education. We have also worked with relevant partners. For the IP ourselves, we also work with WIPO to set up and provide IP courses via e-learning. This is to try to educate, SME and other business sector to know about the issue of IP. Also, we have set up a service desk at our office. We call IP Advisory Center, or IPAC. This is to provide free consultation service to businesses, to innovators, and to SME on IP issues, with the hope that they can create innovation that can be legally protected and also commercialized. New invention that can generate revenue rather than stay statically on shelf. You may, heard many comments that we have lots of, R&D outcome, but it hasn't put into commercialization. So this IPAC, we provide several services. For example, we conduct patent trend analysis. We also recommend patent and trademark search tool, for businesses to do self-check before submitting their registration application. We also working with university to set up what we call TIS. It stands for Technology and Innovation Support Center. We aim it to be a consulting center for university and researchers and SME around this university. Second, on IP protection. This pillar is about legalizing innovation and creativity through patent, trademark, copyright, and also geographical indication, or GI. This will also provide rights and ownership on intangible assets and allow IP to be tradable, licensable, and also used as collateral for lending money from the bank. We also trying to ensure that they can go through registration process in a timely and quality manner, so that they can capture they have better opportunity to and bargaining power to capture value. We also use AI tools in the search and examination process in order to provide efficient registration process. We also provide fast-track program to accelerate registration process. As I mentioned, we want value capture happen to our businesses. This fast-track program also target on some specific industry, which we believe according to the market trend. For example, green technology, food for the future, health and wellness, as well as digital technology. Third, on IP commercializations. Protection alone cannot generate economic growth. We need to convert innovation to commercialization in order to generate revenue. So for example, we need to encourage licensing, franchising, joint venture, and also IP financing. Our office also connect IP owners with investor and partner. So we also provide business matching activity on intellectual property. We also working with our partner to launch IP financing project so that we want to create IP valuation model for business sector to be able to use intellectual property as collateral to lend money from the bank. The last pillar is regarding IP enforcement. This pillar is also very important because once you have intellectual property rights, you need to protect it against infringement and violation. We also collaborate with enforcement agencies such as police, DSI, and custom to try to protect and ensure high protection for rights owner. We also launched trademark monitor project to help businesses to be able to monitor whether their trademark has been violated overseas. So in conclusion, I want to say that there are 4 points that I would like to highlight here. First is future trade center on intangible assets, and strong intellectual property system enable national value capture. Third, Thailand 4-pillar IP framework is key to increasing share in global value chain. And last one, that strengthening IP value chain means strengthening national competitiveness. So I believe that this 4-pillar IP framework is key to help domestic firms shift toward trade in intangible assets and can gain more share, capture more value in global value chain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kun Oromon, for laying that out for us to understand it faster and better for the new plans to come. But when you talk about challenging times, there is always a challenge to the question of what about sustainability? And I'd like to ask this question or go towards the ADB, Kun Aaron, about national strategies across Asian economies. When you talk about these strategies, there's a question of whether or not they align or misalign with global green finance standards and taxonomies. And after that, I'm sure a lot of us want to know what can the ADB do in terms of playing a role in assisting the developing countries in Asia.
Thanks, and maybe it's useful to start that question with what is green financing? We hear it a lot. We hear low carbon financing, we hear blue financing, we now hear pink financing. Essentially what we're talking about here is financing flows that are being directed towards a specific goal. So in the case of green financing, this is funding that is supporting low carbon transition for the economy, but also climate adaptation measures. And once we sort of have that definition in hand, I think it's really interesting to reflect on how much of that financing is needed. So in ASEAN alone, it's estimated we need about $40 billion in green financing per year. And if we expand that definition out to Asia, it's about $200 billion a year just to meet the transition goals of this region. Yet, while I think we're seeing pretty rapid growth in the development of green financing markets, particularly in ASEAN, there's clear that there are significant market challenges that we continue to face, and it's for that reason that the investment levels that we see are falling short of what's required. As you say in your question, one of the key issues in green financing markets are, of course, the very significant differences and you could say inconsistencies that exist across countries for what is green finance standards. And this includes in particular on the taxonomies within Asia. So while there is strong demand for green financing, it's these inconsistencies as well as weak national verification systems that are creating real and substantial challenges for big investors to channel funding into green financing, particularly when we're talking about cross-border capital flows. To address this at the national level, I would prioritise continuing to take steps that strengthen the regulatory underpinnings of green finance. It's always easy to talk about the big deals that have been done or the latest bond that's been issued, but actually the whole system is underpinned by the regulation that supports green and blue financing in these ASEAN markets. For ADB, we of course continue to play a direct focus on investing directly in sectors like renewable energy, low energy data centres, resilient infrastructure. But in particular, we do have a green and social bonds initiative, which has become very active here in Thailand. It's particularly exciting. We're pleased to be able to step up the support we're providing, particularly around addressing the regulatory constraints. This has included recently, for example, working with the Securities and Exchange Commission, who are preparing for the adoption of the IFRS sustainability disclosure standards, which is a big step forward for Thailand. But since 2020, ADB has actually supported the issuance of just over $5 billion in green and blue bonds for Thailand. This has included Asia's first sovereign sustainability bond, which was achieved by the Public Debt Management Office in 2024, as well as the first sustainability bond issued by a state-owned enterprise, which was done by EGAT as well. So actually building on the success of Thailand, we're now seeing a lot more of these bond issuances with our work growing particularly fast in Indonesia, Philippines, as well as Cambodia. I would probably finish off that comment though by making one also important point. I think when we're talking about sustainability finance and channeling these funds, it's not about how much money has been mobilised, it's not about how many deals have been done. It's about being able to verify the impact that this funding is having on people on the ground and in supporting a country's transition towards a greener economy. And for that reason, I think we need to keep focusing on those verification measures, as that will really be the key to unlocking much larger green financing flows into the future.
Yeah, definitely a challenging time, but a positive one indeed in terms of what can be done, as what you said, and ADB is on the ground talking about having true impact. Now, we talked about trade earlier this morning, and the Commerce Minister did talk about how it really has to change. We have to change our perspective, our mindset of how we can go about with trade. And it's long been a powerful engine that has driven Thailand's growth, supporting structural transformation and job creation. But of course, we have the unexpected rapid change of the economic, international trade landscape that we're facing. So I posed it to you, Khun Sheila, a tough question. In terms of repositioning, we heard about how we might be repositioning from the Thai side, but from your perspective as a senior economist at the World Bank, how can Thailand reposition its trade policy and strategy to support its ambition to be more inclusive and sustainable as a status of a high-income economy?
Thank you very much, Kumpupe, and sincere thanks to our kind hosts and organizers from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Commerce, ITD, the Harvard Club of Thailand, and really excited to be here to be part of this conversation. Lots to unpack in your question, I think, but let me start with a striking headline number. And the headline number is that the share of trade in Thailand's GDP reached almost 140% last year. 140% is the role of trade in Thailand's economy, and about half of that has been accounted by exports. So against this turbulent environment and what we see, this potential paradigm shift in the international trade and investment landscape, let me quickly pose a potentially controversial question for all of us here to consider, and that is, with this 140%, is Thailand's economy too open? Is it too exposed to these external factors that are now shifting around? Is it too vulnerable? Should we be thinking about reducing Thailand's dependence on trade? And I was going to quickly throw it out there, and with a show of hands, do you think that Thailand's economy is too open? Is it too open?
Anyone?
Should we focus on reducing vulnerabilities?
I see someone raised one hand over there.
As you're thinking through your answer. So I spent 4 years in Indonesia, right? And Indonesia's trade openness stands at about 1/3 of Thailand. So there, the share of trade in GDP is about 50%, right? But the national discourse is more and more about reducing vulnerabilities, reducing dependence on the rest of the world. So I arrived to Thailand about 6 months ago, and I really try to understand what's Thailand's growth prospects going forward, and whether this high exposure to trade and investment, is it really a source of vulnerabilities? So, without giving away, I guess, the main message, and I think very much predictably from World Bank trade economists, I would make the case that no, Thailand's economy is not too open. I think as we've been thinking through some of these challenges, the question for Thailand is not the choice between becoming more closed or becoming more open, but it's rather about increasing the quality of openness. So I don't know if some of these messages resonate with you, but I think based on what we've been hearing today, you know, the goal of all these shifts is definitely not to be looking inwards. It's about, let's see how is it that Thailand can position itself to increase the benefits of trade and investment for the domestic economy and for the Thai people. So just to give you a sense of some of the thinking that goes into the analysis we are doing. So we are undertaking this big analytical report in the lead up for the annual meetings, which, by the way, many of you may know that it will take place in October of this year here in Bangkok. So we're thinking through some of these development challenges to try to understand and have a broader discussion on some of these things. So looking backward to then look forward. So let's take just a minute to look backwards. Looking backwards at the last 35, 40, 50 years in Thailand, the recipe for growth, and I'm a development economist, so is the recipe for fast growth looking backward has been export-oriented industrialization, right? Thailand has been growing really fast on the back of this manufacturing export. It has been one of the fastest growing economies in the region. It has been attracting a lot of FDI, creating a lot of jobs. So this recipe for growth has been working very well, right? But I guess looking forward, the question is how this growth model of export-oriented industrialization is going to perform. And I think here's where we make the case that maybe we need to take a step back and rethink and reevaluate and try to explore these new sources of growth and competitiveness for Thailand. So in this report that I've mentioned before, we identify 5 industries of the future, which Her Excellency Kun Supaji has also hinted at. So the 5 industries of the future very much align with what I'm going to put on the table in terms of 3 areas of competitiveness for Thailand to develop going forward. We like to talk about competitiveness as trade economists, but let me put on the table 3 areas of competitiveness. The very first one would be green competitiveness. So green competitiveness to transform climate change as a risk into climate change as an opportunity and ride the wave of this fast-growing segment of the international trade and capitalize on some of these opportunities. The second area of competitiveness is services competitiveness. So here is where we see Thailand's economy it's really supported by services sector's growth. If you look at the latest growth numbers, in fact, manufacturing is actually contracting. It's services that is pulling the economy along, allowing for some of these job creation effects. So realizing the potential of services sectors and some of the associated reforms that will be needed, I think it's the second areas of opportunity that we see. And the very last one would be digital competitiveness. Again, very much in line with what we've heard before. Here's where we see great opportunities to build on productivity growth, for inclusion, and many, many other development and inclusion aspects that we like to see growth translate into as an opportunity going forward. So I won't go into the details of all of these, but I would be happy to have a conversation on any of these three areas, and then I would very much welcome the opportunity to share the findings of the report that we are working on these three areas.
I think you've opened up a lot of people's curiosity, and I'm sure they will come and see you and the rest of our speakers as we wrap it up. And we're heading towards the end of our session, but I'd like to give an opportunity to each of our panelists here to kind of give us the key takeaway from today. What should we think about? Starting with Kun Rutikon. We spoke, or we heard a lot from this morning about how important it is to support each other, not just within the country department per department, but also for other countries as well. What kind of platforms do you think that we have right now that we can use and leverage to have efficient collaboration?
Thank you very much. Let me put it this way. I think we would like to reiterate that we believe in the rule-based trading system. We believe in the rules of multilateralism. So the platform that you mentioned, we can look at three layers at the world stage. With the WTO has some pressure, unprecedented pressure right now. So we would work towards the reform of the WTO. The second layer is a regional level, which RCEP, Regional Economic Cooperation Partnership, that we are focusing on a lot. RCEP has been one of our answers to the regional trade and economic integration. And the last layer close to home is the Mekong cooperation. We have Mekong to address a lot of issues that address our capacity. We address 3 points: น้ำ อากาศ อาชญากรรม which mean water management, transboundary pollution, and transnational crime. So these are the key areas that the Thai government is working towards, especially fighting online scam, which is not affecting the business, but is a theft to your life as well. So these 3 platforms are falling into our economic diplomacy, 3C: competitiveness, collaboration, and confidence. So I think it's been elaborated by the Foreign Minister Sihasak. So these are the platforms that I share with you. Thank you.
It's very exciting indeed. And a little bit more about intellectual property there, Kun Aramon. Thank you for laying out what we have in terms of the infrastructure, but then when we take a look at the implementation of how we can support domestic innovation capabilities, how can we go about doing that more?
Thank you. I think nowadays, we have a call from businesses that we need to do structure transformation in order for Thailand to be able to participate more efficient in the global economy. So on this, I believe that we need to set priority and also need to be target. As I come from Ministry of Commerce, I think our ministry have a motto, which is demand-driven or market-driven production, which means that we need to produce, we need to innovate according to the market trend. So, for example, as you also mentioned, the industry, targeted industry that Minister Supaji has also mentioned, that we know nowadays that we may have to produce, food for good health and longevity. We also may need to produce goods and services to preserve energy and environment. So this, if we look at the statistic of my department, top 5 sector or industry that applying for trademark and patent registration, unsurprisingly, top 5 is fall under this targeted industry. That means the business know that they also have to follow the market. So let me also trying to again talk about Thailand intellectual property framework that I think we also need to reformulate or adjust, this to move from towards, domestic innovation capability to move towards market trend. I will start with, for example, IP creation. Our department also work with several partners, including Ministry of Higher Education, also NEAR Innovation Agency about this. We want to help startup, SME, and also university that if they want to create intellectual property, if they want to create innovation, this also have to reflect it that creativity and innovation that can be commercialized, which means we help them to provide tools for them to do self-check, to do a search, to do a patent trend analysis. So I think, and we also that we may not need to have a big amount of filings, but I think we need to have a quality filing, a quality patent application that can be protected as well as to be commercialized. We also working with WIPO on this issue. Second, on IP protection, I want to say that we are in the process of revising our intellectual property laws, patent, copyright, and I hope that when we got a new government in the office and also a parliament, this process will be continued. What we're trying to do in our IP law, especially Patent Act revision, we're trying to reduce the backlog and streamline the registration process so that we hope that when businesses and SME applying for IP registration, they will get it in time, in order to commercialize. The other thing is that we also revising our law to enable Thailand to accede to international intellectual property agreement. For example, on industrial design international registration, we haven't yet acceded to this Hague agreement, so we are revising our patent law in order to enable Thailand to accede to this agreement as well. As I mentioned earlier, that we also provide fast-track registration channel. So the targeted industry that we put into our fast-track program also matching with the market trend. For example, AI, green technology, as well as digital technology. On commercialization, I think it is important that we try to bridge the gap between research and industry. We also set up, service advisory center in our office to provide services on this matter. We also working with WIPO to set up IP management clinic to help SME to use their IP as a strategic business to bring domestic and international IP expert to provide consultation to our businesses. I also would like to mention one particular intellectual property, which is geographical indication or GI. I think this is important to help community earn and gain, revenues, because geographical indication or GI can enhance rural community income and also set up regional branding, because GIs possess a unique characteristic which is related to the specific areas, and the owner of GI can only be SME or community under this area. So far we have around 252 GI products in Thailand, covering both agriculture and non-agriculture products. And we also trying to help these GI producer to maintain their standard. Because in order to get a GI, you need to pass a specification. And I think this is very important if we can strengthen an internal control system. So it means that community products will also meet a standard qualified by the market. The other point that I want to mention is regarding IP financing. I think Thailand, we already have an act which we call Business Collateral Act for 10 years, and believe it or not, intellectual property only can use the benefit of this act for only 0.07% of the total value, which means that we have seen in the report IP and finance, we have seen the problem of debt bear by SME. However, we believe that if we help them to be able to use IP as a financing, as a collateral for bank, it will help our SME to be able to capture the value in the present global economy. But we know that when we talk to bankers, they are saying that they have two concerns. First concern is regarding IP valuation. And the second concern is regarding, they say that we don't have secondary market. If they receive intellectual property as a collateral, if something, default happen, they don't know, the bank don't know where to resell this intellectual property. So right now, Thailand, we are working with WIPO, because the DG of WIPO, he come from Singapore and he recognized this problem. He emphasized on this, and we also working with ASEAN to ensure that we can create ecosystem that enable IP financing to work properly and efficiently. The last part is on IP enforcement. I think if we want to become IP and technology owner, we also need to protect our rights. And on this, we have to collaborate with other relevant agencies on this. We also have to protect our IP rights domestically and abroad. So in conclusion, I want to focus on two things. First, strengthening all four pillars of IP value chain is essential in this structural transformation to become innovation-led growth economy. And the second thing is that public and private collaboration is key to move Thailand from technology absorption to domestic innovation capability. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, I just want to wrap it up a little bit more with Sheila and Aaron here. In terms of starting with Sheila, you mentioned that there's a lot of opportunities. We are not just too open, but at the same time, Thailand faces challenges. There's that's the elephant in the room, right? And of course, when you talk about developing countries, they have smaller, less liquid capital markets. It's harder for them to, raise capital. What role could the World Bank play in narrowing the gap for the developing countries?
Thank you very much, Kumpupe. Hugely important question, although maybe not as relevant here in Thailand, where domestic financial markets are really deep and well developed. But more generally, I think for developing and low-income countries, This comes at the core of development finance and the challenges that are associated with it. And there's really two interrelated issues that need to be considered. The first one, as you kindly were hinting to it already, many developing countries are facing a structural cost of capital penalty. So what we see is that sovereign spreads for middle-income countries are significantly higher than, for instance, in advanced economy peers. And then I'm not even talking about some of the frontier low-income economies where we see these spreads rise above 800 basis points. So it's an important part of the challenge. Now, the flip side of this coin is that we see public debt rising to unprecedented levels. And the consequence of this rising public debt is obviously the cost of public debt, which is interest payments, which we see in some of our countries that we work with. Interest payments amount to more than 10% of government revenues. So for me, as a development economist, the implication of this rising debt and interest payments is the shrinking fiscal space that governments can allocate to development priorities, whether it's health, education, infrastructure, climate, and so on and so forth. So really important challenges to consider, but I think thinking about this more, not just about financial issues, but development issues. From a private sector perspective, if these domestic players and firms cannot access long-term finance, we see that they implicitly allocate less to, for instance, innovation or other types of investment that we would like to see. And then, as I mentioned, on the government expenditure side, these are squeezing out important development expenditures. So what does the World Bank do? Obviously, we put to play a lot of our instruments, whether it's lending, advisory, capacity building, technical assistance, but just a couple of headliners in terms of how is it that we tackle this development finance challenge in general. The very first one comes directly at the heart of the question, and that is by effectively lowering the cost of capital for some of our client countries through our lending instruments. So the World Bank lends on concessional terms, highly concessional terms with big grant elements to low-income countries, but also market-based lending to our more middle-income countries, but with longer maturity and obviously better rates. So this is aiming to reduce the cost of capital. Now, the second one would be through some of our instruments, whether it would be guarantees or political risk insurance or blended finance instruments, where we use these tools to try to crowd in some of the much needed private investment, and these guarantees and blended finance instruments effectively aim to lower the risk premium for some of the private investors and implicitly boost private investment and crowd in some of these flows that we like to see. Especially in some of the emerging areas of challenge, new and ongoing, whether it's climate, digital, or some of these associated flows. The third one would be more towards a long-term institutional building perspective, where our capacity building and technical assistance comes into play. And this is our work to develop domestic capital markets, and also build some of these institutions that are required in order to make these domestic financial markets develop, whether it's through our advisory services, advisory on debt management, debt transparency, public investment management, and many of the areas that are associated with financial markets. Trade finance is where our sister organization, the International Finance Corporation, plays a hugely important role. And I know this has been a topic of today's discussion, so the IFC is very much active in the area of trade finance, including for SMEs where we lend to private banks, and then these are getting associated with trade finance lower down. So, yeah.
A lot to be done indeed, and we look forward to the role of the World Bank. As you mentioned there are some activities to look forward to in the year to come. Now, lastly, Aaron, why not we end up with sustainability, right? Why not we take a look at what you mentioned in terms of green bond frameworks? First off, what do you think are the challenges, and how do you think we can overcome it and also build more credibility?
Yeah, thanks. Great question to end on. And I think the point raised by my World Bank colleague is, Thailand and ASEAN in general is very lucky to have quite deep capital markets locally, but we do continue to see a lack of investment into green infrastructure, in large part due to bankability gaps, right? So the key question is, why isn't all of that funding that exists in the region being channeled into more infrastructure and long-term financing in the region? So while it has been growing fast, is there enough? And there's a lot of reasons why that's the case. Many projects face uncertain revenue streams. This is particularly the case for climate adaptation investments, whereas mitigation in the energy sector tends to be easier to bank. Adaptation investments are much harder to pull out revenues from to support green financing. We also see, as I mentioned before, issues around evolving regulatory frameworks, availability of credible data to support green investments, and then more locally at home, we see things like currency risk. So that continues to be a major issue across ASEAN for international investors coming into local markets, particularly where we see a lot of climate investments are long-term, payoff in nature, and capital tends to prefer short-term, particularly in Asia. So what can we do? I'd highlight three things that we can do. The first is, again, we really need to take the time and the effort to link those national green financing frameworks with international and regulatory frameworks. This is not just a regulatory issue, but it's key because it allows the investors to avoid the risk of a term is called greenwashing. You probably hear a lot about this. They need confidence that the money is going into the activities that the funding was targeted for. A second area that I think is particularly exciting for countries like Thailand is how do we build revenue models around climate adaptation? A good example of this might be Thailand's enormous coastal adaptation needs. It's facing big challenges around seagrass plantation, dugong populations are declining. This is a huge risk for Thailand's massive tourism industry. How can we build partnerships locally with hotel providers, with tourism operators, with other beneficiaries of these ecosystem services to generate revenue streams that can sort of incentivize investment in what has otherwise been traditionally a public sector activity? And I think there's a lot of countries around the world that are really pushing hard on this agenda, together with big infrastructure providers, financiers, and there's a huge potential for this to grow in Thailand to help alleviate the burden that the government has on public investment, but also to encourage more investment in climate adaptation. The third thing I would highlight is how do we continue to develop local currency markets? This is particularly important for the mitigation side of green finance. We need local currency markets to be operating well to remove volatility risk, particularly for energy companies that only generate local currency revenues. We need to continue to broaden the domestic investor base, and we need to look at measures where we can bring in more of the pension funds, the insurers, who are the ones with the long tenor financing that is really needed to underpin a big scaling up into green finance. But I think I'd close by saying I think all of this is a really exciting area for Thailand over the next 5 to 10 years. It has already sort of couched itself as a regional leader on green finance. Many other countries are now looking to Thailand for examples, and I think it can continue to play this leadership role if it keeps taking these steps forward.
Thank you so much to our panelists. We started off with challenges that seem very hard to overcome, but we ended our talk with positive vibes in terms of what are the potential things that we can leverage. Please give a hand to all of our panelists. Thank you so much, Ka. If you have any questions, you can always talk to each of them. As of course, I'd like to invite you back to your seats. Thank you so much. And of course, I'd like to address the rest of you here in the room and also online. We hope you had a great time with us here in terms of navigating the global trade shifts, insights from UNCTAD Trade and Development Report, and strategic implications for Thailand, along with our panel discussion, Navigating Global Trade Shifts, Strategic Implications for Thailand. On behalf of the organizers, we'd like to express our sincere appreciation to our keynote speakers, our UNCTAD colleagues joining us online, our distinguished panelists, and all of our participants here today. Your insights and engagement have contributed meaningfully for today's talks. And please don't go anywhere until you give us feedback, because feedback is so important to us. We want to hold more sessions like this, so please do scan the QR code, whether you're online or on-site. Please help us out and give us your feedback. It is invaluable to us. Thank you so much for coming with us here today. We wish you gained a lot of insight. It's been a pleasure to be your MC for today. Sawasdee ka.